Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. My name is José Joel Peña Llanes. I'm a professor at the Facultad de Estudios Superiores Zacatlán of the National Autonomous University of Mexico, and also member of various think tanks, including the Mexican Council on Foreign Relations, the COMEXI. A warm welcome to all participants joining us for the webinar series Rethinking Mexico-China-US Relations in a Disrupted Global Order and Multidisciplinary Perspective. We are very deeply grateful for your engagement throughout the series. More than 200 registrants signed up for the webinar series, a testament to the urgency and relevance of the themes we are examining together. Today's event is the final webinar. We are very sad, but we have good news that I will share with you at the end of this webinar. And today's webinar is titled Building a New Bilateral Agenda, Mexico-China Cooperation in a Multipolar World. Our primary objective is to explore future-oriented areas of cooperation, including infrastructure, technology, climate policy, and connectivity within the broader framework of South-South cooperation and aim at the ongoing redefinition of global norms and governance structures. As the international system becomes more polycentric, the contours of cooperation between Mexico and China are likely to be shaped not only by bilateral trade and investment flow, but also by emerging industrial ecosystems, regulatory governance and divergence also, and the politics of standards. Technology intensive sectors from semiconductors to digital public infrastructure will condition the space for collaboration, while climate policy, resilient supply chains, and sustainable financing will determine whether cooperation can be scaled, inclusive, and norm compatible. Within this context, our panelists will examine how technology and emerging industries could anchor a pragmatic Mexico-China agenda and attract high-quality investment, how the Mexico-China relationship reverberates across third countries with a focus on implications for Philippines, foreign policy and economic strategy, and the legal challenges of resource nationalism for Chinese investment in Mexico, especially where energy, critical minerals, and strategic infrastructure intersect with domestic regulatory autonomy. Regarding the format of this webinar, each panelist will have up to 15 minutes for their presentation. We will then move to question and answer segments, and I kindly ask you to submit your questions via the Q&A function or through the chat. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Dr. Raquel Isamara León de la Rosa. Dr. León de la Rosa is director of the Observatory of Chinese Politics and the Ibero-American Network of Sinology at the Galician Institute of Documentation and International Analysis. She collaborates with Casa Asia of the Spanish Ministry of Foreign Affairs, a full-time professor researcher in international business at the Benemérita Universidad Autónoma de Puebla here in Mexico. She holds a bachelor's in international relations, a master's degree in Chinese culture, society, and economy, Chinese language studies at South China University of Technology, and a PhD in Trans-Pacific relations. A former visiting professor at National Shengxi University on geopolitics and semiconductor diplomacy, she has more than 40 publications on Pacific Rim linkages, previously worked with Inter-American Dialogue, and is a Level 1 member of Mexico's National System of Researchers. Dr. León de la Rosa, thank you for being here. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, good evening, or good morning. It will depend on which point of the where are you located. So for me, it's a huge pleasure being here to sharing you this really important topic about the cooperation between Mexico and China, talking specifically about technology. Before I could start to present my presentation, I just want to show my gratitude for the organizers and all the efforts that right now you are creating to develop this kind of dialogue between Mexico and China. I think that right now is really important. And in addition, I just want to recognize the presence of some of my colleagues and also, of course, of the Ambassador José Luis Bernal, one of the most important promoters of this dynamic with China. And well, for me, it's a pleasure to share these ideas with you. So, to start this presentation, I just want to introduce a little bit the purpose of this research in line. Since the two past years, I will start to work with the technology as whole. Establish I passed the last semester trying to tracking and also understand most of these ideas related with technology specific with semiconductors, and also this kind of landscape that right now with this change of the American trade policy could create different scenarios, and specifically in the case of Mexico and China. So well, for that reason, my proposal is to rescue some key concepts in the case of the pan-securitization, also clustering, and also the network analysis. So as a kind of theoretical framework, I just want to establish this idea about how does trade and protectionism so will create a new dynamic when we're talking about international relations. In the case of the American economy and all these kind of facts that right now we could identify, and maybe with this dynamic that we have right now with the America First policy through the Trump's administration. So we could identify this kind of process starting with this idea of securitization, and how does this could create a different dynamic talking about trade policy as a kind of a strategic policy to improve the status quo of states. At the same time, I just want to share this idea about this new trend that it is the new protectionism against this hyper globalization with recognizing these new actors in the case of China that create this kind of confrontation when we're talking about international trade, and how does this could create these new dynamics that we could identify as a kind of trade war. So rescuing this, some authors, the case of Liu, he proposed this idea of pan-securitization. So here we are trying to introduce not only a traditional point of view of security, also we are trying to add new elements to talk about this. The case of the supply chain, specifically of critical materials, at the same time economics, the environmental impact, and also, and of course, technology. So during the past 10 years, maybe 10 years, we have emphasized this idea of the decoupling in the case of the American trade policy, specifically from China. So some authors also identify these three different possible scenarios when we're talking about decoupling from China. How does this could affect not only the trade dynamic, also we're talking about security, identifying this high risk of the decoupling because of this interdependence between the American and the Chinese economy. And finally, how does the technology has changed all these kind of global production networks when we're talking about this phenomenon of decoupling promoted from the last three administrations from the United States. So in the case of China, so it is important to establish how does, in another hand, we could identify this long-term plan when we're talking about technology. In the last years, with this kind of change of a manufacture model, trying to go into this high quality manufacture, we could identify these different or these particular elements when we're talking about the Chinese economic model, specifically trying to think about and also create this dynamic of technology. Right now, I mean, during this week, inside, inside, I mean, in Beijing, the government is discussing about this new 5-year plan. And of course, technology is part of this, trying to improve this kind of model, trying to achieve this position as a global leader of high quality. Also, trying to identify technology as this innovation-driven economy. And of course, how does this could include people to improve this kind of long prosperity when we're talking about the societal dynamic. So the result of this is, of course, this idea of clustering. As you can see in the following figure, maybe 30 years ago, it was really common to identify these clusters with all this process of openness from China. I mean, during the 80s specifically. And nowadays, well, the idea to trying to create a complex network, not only in the East Coast, also trying to introduce another part of the Chinese territory could create this improvement of the kind of clustering that right now China has. For that reason, well, of course, that when we are talking about right now clustering in China, we must identify the characteristic of high performance. That it is really important trying to compare what is the dynamic if we compare this with Mexico. So right now, we are challenging not only a trade war. At the same time, we're rescuing this idea of trade, but at the same time, the technological war between China and United States, specifically with this idea of two models of self-energy sufficiency. So, well, for that reason, in this slide, you could identify how those both models are really opposite. In the case of United States, we are identifying this reshoring trend, this fossil fuels energy source. Also, well, they are trying to lead in with this fabless business model that, well, right now, it creates this kind of lack of capability to innovate inside the American territory. And also, well, how does the tariff barriers and also trying to create this new dynamic of bilateral agreements, well, could change this dynamic. In other hand, we have this offshoring, nearshoring proposed by China. This kind of trying to look in this clean energy leadership, and also how does they have integrated through at the trialex model all the stakeholders that are really important inside this technology develop. So, well, for that reason, well, we have right now, or I mean, economies like Mexico, we are in the middle of this. The following slide is a result of another researching, specifically trying to identify how does all the economies or the most important economies inside world will create this kind of linkage through this network analyze. So the results that as you can see, well, in the center of this network, we could identify in one part we have United States, but at the same time we have in the center, I mean, as a kind of node between United States and China, in the case of Japan. But well, the result of this network is really interesting because we are not really interconnected. The reality with this kind of analyze is that we could identify by colors different examples of regionalism because of this expert network. So, well, in this case, one of my findings is that, well, if we pay attention, that East Asian economies are the most important economies when we are talking about this worldwide network. But in the case of Mexico, for example, we have like this kind of position related, of course, with United States because of the UMSCA, but at the same time, we have like this close relation with the Central American region. So that's part of our trade ecosystem. And for that reason, well, in the case of Mexico, the reality is that we don't have a really good position when we're talking about the global dynamics. So Just only for rescuing the other cases, of course, that in this orange color, we could identify the case of the RCEP. Also, we have the case of the European Union in the pink color. And well, some economies that are not necessarily linked with through a regionalism, like the case of Cambodia or the case of Qatar, that they have some kind of particularities, and for that reason, well, we have like this kind of a result. So in this analyze, well, one of the most important things is that we could identify that nowadays we have a global network with a high specialization in the case of the exportable supply. So, well, for that reason, one of the most important challenges it is the lack of diversification, and also this dynamic with new trade partners. That's the case of Mexico. So when we're reviewing this, this trade balance between Mexico and China, well, we could identify immediately what kind of, offerings we are sending to China, specifically related with meaning, and also, the components talking about electronics. So for that reason, well, we are more related in this part, not only talking about supply, but at the same time manufacture as one of the most important, industry to create this kind of linkage because of the UMSCA. So in addition, so it is important to identify how does we could we have these different kind of sectors. The first sector talking about mining specifically with copper, because of all that supply chain of electronics, and also we have like this kind of returns of these kind of elements trying to being part of the or materials that are part of the final merchandise that we are trading, not only for the Mexican market, also going to United States. So if we review the Mexican international trade dynamic, the reality is that well, we could identify three different areas that could be improved when we're talking about a potential linkage with other economies. So well, here is really clear how does the automotive sector is really important to Mexico, the case of machinery and the case of electronics. So if we review this kind of dynamic, and also the industries that right now this high quality model that China is improving, of course, that we could identify some similar points with the Chinese model. So the reality is that when we're talking about technology and Mexico, well, we have, if we compare with another countries from Latin America, the reality is that we have this kind of gap between the case, for example, of Brazil or Argentina or Chile, talking about technological projects in our territory. And well, here, as you could identify, most of them are related with artificial intelligence, surveillance, loans, the cloud, internet, specifically with this kind of infrastructure that in our country, unfortunately, we didn't develop. So in the case of the FDI between China in Mexico, so most of this FDI is related with these three different points that I identified with these sectors that we have like this kind of expertise. The part of automotive sector, the technological sector, and of course the case of the machinery. But well, unfortunately, again, if we compare with the rest of America, Latin American, well, we don't have like this kind of flux between China and some countries like I don't know, like Brazil or maybe Ecuador or maybe Peru. So for that reason, I mean, right now we don't have like this kind of, approach or really close approach when we are talking about this. But well, here in the following maps, you could identify some of the Chinese companies manufacturing in Mexico. So in this case, I just want to identify that we are in a kind of first phase when we're talking about, how does this kind of, industries could increase the dynamic between China and Mexico. Right now, in the case, for example, of the automotive sector, we have some cases like Jack and Bike in some of our states, but well, we are not really creating from zero to the final product here in Mexico. They are only a part of this kind of assembly process when we're talking about this kind of companies, or maybe they are part of another, positions in the supply chains like tier one or tier two when we're talking about automotive, or when we're talking about electronics, is more or less the same dynamic. But the reality is that something that these Chinese companies know about Mexico is that they know specifically in which part it is the best localization to develop this kind of manufacturing in our country, because it is the same when we're talking about what kind of clusters we have in Mexico, and well, for that reason is like really similar both maps. So trying to going to the last part of the presentation, I just want to share you these different cases when we're talking about technology and stakeholders. Of course, that when we're talking about this, companies must play a really important role when we're referring to this potential cooperation. So here you have in the first part of the slide the case of Intertech, that is a really recent investment in Nuevo León. As you can read over here, this is a company related with smart automotive, and with different kind of products that are related with this high quality model. And at the same time, we have the case that is really close to my hometown, because it is here in Puebla. This company, Solabobe, right now is in the third phase, trying to achieve this position as the most important factory, talking about this solar cell factory. So for that reason, the point here is that of course that we have this presence from Chinese companies trying to create linkage with Mexican governments and also Mexican companies, but the reality is that it is a really low percent if we compare maybe with the dynamic of other countries or maybe other industries. So also, I just want to share this case talking about the stakeholders, the cooperation between the government and universities. In the case of Mexico, we could identify some examples. I just want to rescue the case of my university. In this case, some of my colleagues of the engineering, careers and also researching centers. Right now they have like this kind of cooperation with the Chinese government because of this international scientific community trying to improve and also to create this new technology for the Chinese space station. Unfortunately, here we don't have the role of the Mexican government trying to improve this kind of cooperation. And by the end, this kind of cooperation is just only, it could occur in one time, but it's not necessary that it could be frequently. One of the most important troubles when we're talking about this is like right now the position of the Mexican government. In this picture, you could identify these different statements when we're talking about trade policy, when we're talking about also geopolitics because of our border with United States. And the case of BYD and these mega factories in Latin America is a perfect example about how does Mexico and Brazil right now they have a different perspective when we're talking about this kind of cooperation or potential industries when we're talking about technology. So in one hand we have this case right now with Mexico, project canceled by the middle of this year, and also this new barrier or these tariffs that right now the Mexican government is trying to establish to Asian economies, trying to not say, but well, the reality is that is really focused to the Chinese products. And in other hand, we have the opening of this mega factory in Brazil that right now with this kind of project. Of course, that the Brazilian economy will improve immediately with one sector that they lose years ago. So, as a kind of conclusion, I just want to rescue three axes. The first one, Trump as a fact, when we're talking about China and Mexico. I mean, the future of the UMSCA, it will be really important. I just want to share you that before this presentation, I participate in these consultations about the UMSCA here in the state of Puebla. And for me, it was really surprised how does the entrepreneurs or the businessmen, they have this perception that China is a risk when we're talking about the UMSCA. So in that case, unfortunately, well, it's different point of views when we're talking about government, the case of scholars, and also the case of the businessmen. So the point of technology is really important. Why? Because right now we are inside in a process with I just want to name like late Plan Mexico as this kind of plan for the next years talking about development. I just want to emphasize that it is late. Why? Because it's supposed that this discussion must be appeared like 20 years ago, and right now we are trying to resolve it in a really quickly way, but not really with a really clear point of view or strategy, trying to include this tetra-helix model. And for that reason, that gave us a kind of lack when we're trying to create this cooperation with China. The last point that I just want to rescue is that right now, as I said, China is discussing this new 5-year plan, and of course that it is a high-speed plan. So unfortunately, when we're talking about this relation between China and Mexico and this technological cooperation, we are not talking asymmetrical, dialogue. We're talking about an asymmetrical, but most of the reasons it is because the characteristics of the Mexican ecosystem to create this kind of dialogue. Thank you so much. And again, it was my pleasure to share this with you.
Thank you very much, Dr. León de la Rosa. Thank you very much for that insightful and forward-looking analysis. Our second speaker is Dr. Kan Wang. He is Associate Professor in the School of International Relations at Guangdong University of Foreign Studies. He received a Doctor of Philosophy degree in Public International Law from Wuhan University, holds a Master's of degree of Law in International Relations from Jinan University in Guangzhou, and holds a Bachelor's of Law in Chinese Literature from Anhui Normal University. During his doctoral thesis research on the South China Sea in the Philippines, he conducted independent research visits to the Department of Foreign Affairs, the Congress of the Philippines, the University of the Philippines, and Ateneo de Manila University. He has also worked as a postdoctoral researcher at the School of Law at Sun Yat-sen University. His main research interests include the international law of territory and international boundaries, the law of the sea, and diplomatic policy of the Philippines. Dr. Wang, the floor is yours for 15 minutes. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. I have to share my PowerPoint.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Because my international connectivity is not always stable, so in order to ensure my my PowerPoint, my share, I want to turn off my camera. Okay. Okay. Good morning, distinguished colleagues and ladies and gentlemen. Thanks to Professor Jose and Professor Xu for giving me the opportunity to share perspective from a Chinese scholar. Because my research area is China and Philippine relations, my So I only can share some very simple and preliminary observations on China and Mexico relations. Okay, my title I want to share is China-Mexico relations implications for Philippine foreign policy and economic strategy. I will proceed in 5 parts. The first part is China and Mexico relations from trajectory, achievements, and challenges. First, the political architecture. China and Mexico have built a high-level dialogue that is institutional rather than ad hoc, such as regular leader-level contact, minister role consultations, and functional working groups in trade, agriculture, standards, and people-to-people exchange. This design matters because it reduces policy volatility and makes the problem solvable with the existing channels. The second is economical. Let me see. Economical complementary is real. Mexico's role in North America manufacturing, especially autos, electronics, and appliances, meets China's strengths in intermediate goods, capital equipment, and increasingly new energy components. The result is two-way spillovers. Chinese Chinese firms gain North American market proximity. Mexican firms gave predictable, cost-efficient inputs and technology transfer. Logistics has matured as well. That is, such as trans-Pacific routes and inland corridors now support just-in-time flows linking East Asia with North America. Why Mexico? Third, there are visible development dividends, such as industrial parks supply upgrading and vocational training embedded in investment projects. The message here is not charity; it is rule-based cooperation that ties commercial incentives to local job creation and tax revenue. I think there are I think there are 3 challenge clusters stand out China and Mexico relations. The first one is external pressure and de-risking narratives. Regulatory security in third markets, export controls, and politicized rhetoric can slow otherwise rational trade and investment decisions. As you can see, this China and Mexico bilateral merchandise trade in 2024, the surplus is about 4% of Mexico's GDP and far exceeds Mexico's deficit with any other single country. It is a historical high. But when we see the structure, we can see this China's exports are dominated by machinery, electronics, auto parts, and intermediate goods. Most are assembled in Mexico and then re-exported to United States. Mexico's sales to China are still largely copper ores, seafood, fruit, and low-value added parts. These are commodities with low value added and volatile prices. This Mexico's imports high value, exports low value pattern is the root cause of the fast growing surplus. It reflects the global supply chain realities, not a Chinese policy to engineer a surplus. So both China and Mexico Business Council and internal Mexico government papers agree a one-way deficit is is unsustainable long term. The fix should be more high value. Mexican exports to China and more Chinese industrial investment in Mexico, not a blanket tariffs that simply shift costs onto Mexican consumers. Two is domestic governance frictions. Even friendly partners face constraints, infrastructure bottlenecks, custom and standards operation, and multilateral approval process from municipal to federal levels. Three is rising compliance baseline, such as environmental, labor, and debt governance requirements are non-core conditions. The solution is not avoidance, but compliance capacity building, such as auditability, traceability, and worker protection, and backed into project design. The second part is China and Philippines relations. On the political side, China and the Philippines maintain channels across multi-layers. Leaders, foreign ministers, defense and coast guard dialogues, economic and trade emissions, and academic and supranational tracks. These mechanisms are designed to keep difficult issues in a bounded box, while allowing cooperation to proceed. Economically, the relationship has breadths such as agri-fishery trade, electronics and machinery, tourism, education and skill, and infrastructure. That translate into lowered logistics costs, greater market access for Filipino producers, better resilience for supply chains, and tangible local employment. I think the result is win-win benefits. The Philippines gets infrastructure and jobs. Chinese firms gain stable, robust opportunities. Yes. I think there are also three challenge clusters stand out in China and Philippine relations. First, one is maritime disputes and risk of issue linkage. China's position is consistent. Disputes should be managed through dialogue and consultation, avoiding militarization and external bloc politics. From China's perspective, sovereignty is principled, but crisis management is practical. Neither requires shutting the door to trade, investment, and all people-to-people ties. The key is escalation and procedural discipline. Manila, lively democratic competition can produce policy swings and narrative volatility. When maritime coincide with election timelines or leadership reshuffles, economic cooperation might become collateral damage. The remedy is to institutionalize areas of cooperation, such as through memorandum or standard cooperation, standard operating procedures, or bipartisan oversight. So projects survive political weather. I think three is implementation capacity. Large projects require land acquisition, social license, environmental permits, and credit insurance. Delays are common worldwide, not uniquely in the Philippines. The practical fix is front-loaded compliance templates, such as standard labor, environment, and debt clauses. community consultation protocols and clear grievance mechanism. So the execution timelines are predictable. And the third part is China, Mexico, and whereas China, Philippines. Here is a comparative reflection. When we see the similarities, both Mexico and the Philippines are structurally complementary with China. Significant labor forces, openness to manufacturing, exercise system, and investor interest in infrastructure and technology transfer. Both face third-party political noise and rising compliance thresholds. The differences are Mexico enjoys deep lock in North America value chains, giving high policy predictability for manufacturers. Maritime disputes are not central to its China policy. The Philippines, by contrast, has high maritime sensitivity, but also unique opportunities in digital services, agri-food, maritime logistics, and tourism that complement Chinese demand and financing. So I think there are some policy implications for the Philippines on the foreign policy trust. One is to reaffirm dual channels. We have leader to leader. We have to build leader to leader trust building plus working level implementation groups. So the message is talk early, talk often, and talk quietly. Two is institutionalize maritime risk risk control, such as operational hotlines, incident reporting templates, search and rescue coordination, and fishery management agreements. This does not prejudice sovereignty. It prevents miscalculation. Three is to reject securitization of routine commerce. Keep trade, investment, and education exchange out of the security sector. The Philippines benefits when cooperation remains normal and predictable. On economic strategy track, one is anchor three flagship cooperation lanes with China, such as electronics and new energy components, digital services across cross-border e-commerce, and agri-food cold chain, and food security. Two is to build a four-pillar support system, such as trade facilitation, standards, mutual recognition, finance, insurances, and dispute resolution pathways, such as commercial mediation or arbitration, recognized by both sides. Three is to set KPIs with a timetable, define measurable targets, such as job created, port dwell time reduced, train slots delivered, and the SME exporters boarded. So collaboration is evaluated by public outcomes, not political noise. The last part is my short conclusion. First, China and Mexico shows that predictable institutions and complementary supply chains and serious compliance can sustain cooperation even under geopolitical noise. Second, China and Philippines has ingredients for similar success, provided we reinforce disputes, keep channels open, and invest in domestic enables that make projects deliver on time. The third, for manila policy makers, the strategic posture that works is pragmatic dual tracking. That is protect maritime equities through disciplined risk management while unlocking trade, investment, and technology flows that improve daily life for Filipino citizens. In the end, the regional order is preserved not by rhetoric but by institutions that lower risk and projects that raise welfare. As scholars and practitioners, our task is to put disputes into a rule-based booster box and take cooperation out into the daylight when results can be measured and shared. That brings me to the end of my talk today. Thank you very much for your attention. Okay.
Thank you very much, Dr. Wang, for such a thought-provoking presentation. I would like to remind the audience that you may send your questions in the chat and at any time, and we will try to answer them at the end of the presentation of our third and final speaker, Dr. In Wei. She's Associate Professor at the School of International Law in the Southwest University of Political Science and Law. Her research focuses on international economic law, investment law, and international development law. She's currently engaged in projects on SOE discipline in free trade agreements, reform of international investment law, the Belt and Road Initiative, and sustainable development. Her scholarship has appeared in Journal of World Trade, Asia Pacific Law Review, and Hong Kong Law Journal, among others, as well as in edited volumes published by Springer, Routledge, and Brill. Dr. Jean, we are delighted to have you with us. The floor is yours for 15 minutes. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Good morning and good evening to colleagues joining from different parts of the world. And it is great pleasure to speak on this panel. And I want to begin by thank you, our organizers, for bringing us together for this timely conversation. And the topic that I would like to share today concerns the legal challenges of resource nationalism for Chinese investment in Mexico, particularly in the context of global energy transition. Before turning to Mexico specifically, let me briefly situate what I mean by resource nationalism. I'm sorry. Actually, for today's presentation, I will divide it into 5 parts. So firstly, let us see what is resource nationalism in my research. Actually, in the literature on international political economy and international law, resource nationalism refers to efforts of states to assert greater control of their natural resource, whether through ownership, taxation, or regulatory measures that limits or reshape the role of foreign investors. It reflects the enduring tension between sovereign control or sovereignty and market openness, and also between national development goals and international investment rules. So, historically, many scholars have described resource nationalism as a recurring circle. When commodity price rise or when domestic political favor redistributive agendas, states often move to reclaim a great shares of resource rent. Legally, this process tests the boundary between a state's right to regulate and also the investor's right to protection under international investment law. Now, actually, the dynamic has been more visible than in Latin America, which has long been a laboratory of resource sovereignty. Actually, from Mexico, especially in 1938, the oil nationalism, and also through the Venezuela's and also Bolivia's hydrocarbon reforms in the 2010s, and also to Chile's current debates on lithium. Latin American states have consistently viewed natural resource as a foundation of national autonomy and development. So it is within the broad tradition that we can understand Mexico's current wave of resource nationalism under the President Lopez. Actually, since 2018, the current administration have sought to re-empower the states in strategic sections such as energy and mining, and revising the decades of actually liberalization, especially inspired by developed states. In 2022, the mining law was amended to declare lithium exclusive property of nation and to create state-owned enterprises to manage it. So this move marks not only a domestic actually policy shift, but also a response to global forces, the energy transition, and also the restructure of supply chain, as well as the geopolitics of criminal minerals. Against this backdrop, my presentation examines some legal challenges and opportunities faced by Chinese investors operating in Mexico's natural resource sectors. I will focus on three main elements. And the ongoing Ganfeng lithium arbitration, and also the Chinese investment in Mexico's auto and electrical vehicle industries, and also the broader legal and policy framework that shape Mexico's balance between sovereignty and also economic openness. So I'm not quite sure how many of you, especially our audience, heard of this case before, but actually it is quite a typical case that's representing Chinese investment in Latin America, especially under the framework of the resource nationalism. So to ground this discussion, let me begin with the concrete example of this one. So the Ganfeng lithium, one of the Chinese leading battery-grade producers, entered Mexico through the acquisition of a majority stakes in the Sonora lithium projects, considers one of the world's largest undeveloped lithium deposits. However, following Mexico's the mining law reform, the government declared those kind of resources as exclusive property of the nation, effectively canceling Ganfeng's concession. So the Ganfeng subsequently initiated arbitration proceeding against the Mexico government. And this is a case that revealing the clash between the foreign investors' legitimate expectation and the state's sovereign control over strategic minerals. So from a legal, from the legal standing point, three aspects are worth emphasizing. The first one is domestic legal foundation. Actually, the Mexico law special constitution vests ownership of all sub-oil resources in the nation. And also, the legal reforms reaffirmed this. So the second one is international legal obligation. Mexico is bounded by investment protection provision under various treaties, including the USMCA and other of the version bilateral agreements. And these instruments guarantee fair and equitable treatment and protection against expropriation. And the third point is the policy justification. The government has defined the nationalism as essential for ensuring that the benefits of the energy transition are captured domestically and not extricated by the foreign capital. Thus, the Ganfeng dispute is not merely a commercial disagreement. It symbolized a broader recapitalization of sovereignty in the era of decarbonization. And beyond this case, actually, Chinese engagement in Mexico extends well beyond the mining sector. In recent years, Chinese automobile and battery manufacturers, including BYD and also CATL, that is Ningde Shidai, and several mid-tier suppliers have significantly expanded investment in Mexico's electrical vehicle and auto parts industry. And this trend is driven by two actually interconnected forces. The first one is the global energy transition, and which actually is accelerating the shift towards electrical mobility, making access to lithium and battery technology strategically important. And second, Mexico's geopolitical proximity to the US market and its membership in the USMCA provide an attractive platform for Chinese firms seeking regional integration into North America's EV value chain. However, this dynamic also creates challenges. Under the USMCA's rules of origin, the EVs must meet strict regional content threshold to qualify for tariff preferences. At the same time, Mexico's assertion of sovereignty over lithium constrains direct access to raw materials. Consequently, Chinese companies must increasingly pursue joint ventures or technology partnership rather than direct ownership models. So let's see some tensions under the current legal framework. Mexico's evolving stance can be analyzed through three overlapping frameworks. The first one, as I mentioned before, that is domestic law. Actually, the Mexican domestic law it emphasized the national ownership of sub-oil resource, forming the legal foundation for actually the resource nationalism. And the second, the international investment obligation. And despite actually the sovereign prerogatives, Mexico remains subject to obligation under investment treaty and also under the USMCA Chapter 14, which allows investors to challenge measures amounting to expropriation or some kind of unfair, unreasonable, or discriminatory treatment. And also, there is a kind of what I call the regional and geopolitical constraints. The USMCA and the US, actually the Inflation Reduction Act, influence Mexico's policy space by embedding industry policy goals and also supply chain requirements. So for Chinese students, these overlapping framework produce a complex landscape. Regulatory uncertainty on one hand, and new opportunity for policy-aligned investment on the other. So the key lies in strategic adaptation, that is developing partnerships that complement Mexico's industry priority while mitigating legal risks. So let's see something beyond Chinese investors. So the Mexico's experience mirrors a very broad global pattern across Latin American and also African and parts of Asia. Governments are re-evaluating contracts, revising the mining codes and asserting control over criminal minerals. This revival of what I call resource nationalism is not only economic but also normative. It seeks to achieve resource justice, ensuring that green transition does not replicate the historical inequalities in extractive industries. So for international investment regime, actually, they are it raises two fundamental questions. The one is, can current international investment law or the treaty law framework accommodate the rise of sustainability-driven sovereignty? And the second question is how to reconcile investor protection with developmental autonomy. So these are pressing questions at the intersection of climate change, development, and also international economic law. So to conclude, the Mexican case offers three broad lessons. The first one is resource nationalism is evolving. It is no longer about exclusion, but also about renegotiating the terms of participation in strategic sectors. The second, balance investment protection and also the state sovereignty. It is still remain a central challenge for international law in the energy transition. And third, for Chinese investment, and also those Chinese companies, long-term success may depend on legal due diligence, as mentioned before by our first speakers, and also the local partnership and aligned with Mexico's sustainable industry agenda. Ultimately, actually, the contest between sovereignty and globalization, once centered on oil and gas, is now being rewritten through the lithium and electrical vehicles. How states and investors managing this new frontier will shape not only trade and investment flows, but also the broad architecture of the green economy. And this is end of my presentation today, and thank you very much for your attention, and also thanks again for our organizers. And comments and questions are always welcome. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Yin. We are very delighted to have you with us. And also thank you very much for your remarks. We will now open the floor for questions and answers. Please submit your questions through the chat if you want. If addressing a specific speaker, kindly indicate their name at the start. We begin with two questions from Rosalba Gil for Dr. Raquel León de la Rosa. The first one is as follows. Considering China's technological autonomy and the high quality development model, and of course its 15 5-year plan's goal, what are the primary risks for Mexico of becoming a passive consumer of Chinese technology versus an active partner in its development or adaptation? The second question is, how can Mexico use the increasing complexity of its machinery and electronic sectors to diversify its export to China, moving beyond raw materials and into higher value-added technological products? Also, I would like to read one question for Dr. Wan. Given the evolving dynamics between China and Mexico, what specific lessons or strategies should the Philippines consider adopting to enhance its own foreign policy and economic relations in a way that balances agreement with China while safeguarding national sovereignty and economic interest? And one question for Professor Wei. What legal strategies can Chinese investors pursue to mitigate the risk posed by Mexico's increasing resource nationalism, especially regarding nationalization policies and restrictions in the mining and energy sectors, while still complying with Mexican regulatory frameworks and maintaining positive local partnership? So, Dr. León de la Rosa, the floor is yours for 2
Thank you so
minutes,
much.
please.
Thank you so much for the question. I just want to be brief because it's a really long explanation. So first, I just want to establish or address something. When we're talking about right now this idea of technology, we must identify, as I show in this network analyze, that well, right now this kind of technology hub is settled in the East Asian economies, and right now, well, we have like this kind of controversy with United States because, well, because of the reshoring strategy, they are trying to improve this kind of lack of technology. This is really important to understand this dynamic between China and Mexico. And, well, the most important risk here that I could identify is the no action from the Mexican government and all the stakeholders that could be involved. In this case, I just want to emphasize the lack of willingness to diversify our partners. Also, the necessity or this kind of this dynamic to rethink the national ecosystem when we're talking about technology. Then also, well, try to change from this passive and reactive profile that right now Mexico is performing into a long-term plan and reaction. So for that reason, well, I just want to identify three different axes to improve this. Well, the first one, it is this importance to develop a tetra-helix model when we're talking about technology and how to add value to our merchandise or manufacturers that are going beyond our that are going abroad. So for that reason, the first one, because of the increase of protectionism in the United States, that it is a point that it won't change in the future 2 years or 3 years. So it is important to review the UMSCA. I mean, we are in this process, but we have to base this review in and the final making decision process in a minimax dynamic, trying to give really few concessions to the American government, trying to create a not really vulnerable scenario from the Mexican economy. The second is to have a clear strategy for China. I mean, not only see China as a kind of potential risk when we're talking about dealing with United States. Here, well, it's really important to identify these emerging industries and also add not only the government or the scholars. Here I think that the most important stakeholder it is the business world. I mean the businessman. Why? Because well, there is a kind of misunderstanding when we are reviewing the potential of China, specifically in this dynamic because of the Mexican business culture. And the third, it is innovation. I mean, when I'm referring to innovation, I could identify two different sources for innovation. The first one, of course, that because of our background, it will came from the FDI, but at the same time, we need to improve the Mexican companies trying to develop this kind of innovation. And I think that here we could learn a little bit of the Chinese process during the past 30 years. So for that reason, I just want to identify these potential areas and the presentation of Professor Yin is really close to this point of view. I identified new energy as this kind of potential cooperation with China and all the supply chain when we are talking about automotive industry from the batteries, as Professor Yin said, with the case of the lithium and also the sodium right now with Cal that they are developing these new batteries based on sodium. And also right now Mexico has a really huge expertise when we're talking about cars or this kind of industry. So well, we have to transit into being experts to manufacture hybrids and also EVs. So that's my point of view. Thank you so much for the questions.
Thank you very much, Dr. Raquel. Dr. Wang, please.
Okay. Thank you, Professor. I can't. Can you speak your? Can you speak the question more clear? I can hear.
Okay, of course, I will repeat it. Given the evolving dynamics between China and Mexico, What specific lessons or strategies should the Philippines consider adopting to enhance its own foreign policy and economic relations in a way that balances engagement with China while safeguarding national sovereignty and economic interest?
Oh,
Maybe if you agree, I could send you through the chat and I'll give you the floor to Professor Jean and then I come back to you.
okay.
Professor Jean, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, just for John. Actually, if I'm not misunderstanding, the question refers to me in relation to some of the legal methods the Chinese investment can and may pursue under these current situation, especially on the national the resource nationalism. Actually, these the first thing I have to highlight is that the resource nationalism is not only happen in Latin American and also in Mexico. It's happened all around the world. And actually, I have conducted another research. It identified that in developed countries, also for in the Europe and actually US, they also have a kind of resource nationalism, but in different forms. So actually, the challenges I think it's not only for Chinese investor, maybe also for other investor, they want to get their business success. I mean, around world. So for Chinese investors, especially in Mexico and also in broad Latin Americans, the current challenges for them is that uh, actually there are two things they can resort to. The first one is on um use the international I mean the treaty system, the treaty protection. And second one actually is to find some possibilities under the Mexico's domestic I mean framework. So for the first approach, actually I think the usage of it is very limited as I already wrote a paper that concerning the China and Latin American investment treaty practice. Actually, currently, most bilateral investment treaties signed between China and Latin America are very old-fashioned. I mean, super old. For these treaties, they only covers very limited protection for investors. I mean, at this time, it's for Chinese investors. So it is uncertain whether Chinese investor can successfully challenge some resource nationalism measures taken by Mexican governments or other Latin American government. It depends. I mean, how the arbitrators interpret those very limit scope provisions for investment protection. And for the second approach, that is what I call domestic approach. Actually, for this approach, they still have two ways. The first one is whether, I mean, I'm not quite sure it is possible for the new Chinese investor or what I call newcomers from China to Mexico, whether they can negotiate or renegotiate some concession agreement or contract with what we call the stabilization clause, which can, to some extent, to mitigate some uncertainties in the future. And the second way that is, I mean, it's not a legal one, but it's what Professor Rockwell also mentioned before. That is how to enhance, build a good relationship between the with the local communities. I mean, if it's really useful and also good for the local community, for some instance, I think the government may also take into consideration. But now I think the Mexican government also under great pressure due to the Trump's administration, and it may to some extent affect the Mexicans' attitudes towards Chinese investment. So that might be my answers. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Wei. Dr. Wang, if you want to answer the question.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for your question. To balance maritime differences with trade interests at Philippines, I think it should adopt a dual track approach. On maritime issues, continue bilateral dialogue on sovereignty while upholding a multilateral cooperation on robust order. Avoid actions that could be construed as institutionalizing the dispute. On trade relations, replace blanket tariffs with calibrated WTO consistent measures such as port fees and actively expand high-value agri-food and electronics export to China, converting trade surplus into purchase orders for Philippine producers. I think the Philippine policies should manage the overall balance, keep security discussions at the diplomatic and Coast Guard level, and economic cooperation at the parliamentary and private sector level. Also can run both tracks in parallel so that defending sovereignty does not compromise economic opportunities. That's my short answer. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Wang. We don't have any other questions. So as we conclude the webinar series, Rethinking Mexico-China-US Relation in a Disrupted Global Order, a Multidisciplinary Perspective, we want to extend our deepest gratitude to our distinguished speakers for their insights, to everyone who joined us live and engaged so thoughtfully, and to our organizing institutions, the Acatlán Faculty of Higher Studies of the National Autonomous University of Mexico, where I belong, and the Law School at the Jinan University for their generous support and collaboration. And please stay tuned. We'll be back soon with a timely, much needed product emerging from this series that will keep the conversation moving forward. And thank you very much and have a great day and night.